Hey everybody, you are listening to Grace Bond Ministries. Grace Bond Ministries is about sharing the Word of God, having conversations about difficult topics, talking about apologetics, coming together, tackling issues, answering questions, studying the Scripture, doing devotionals. Listen, Grace Bond Ministries has so many different things that we're going to talk about, that we have talked about, we're going to continue talking about, and this podcast is made for someone who wants to know more about the Christian faith, or wants answers to their questions, or just wants to ask questions, or just wants a safe place to talk about things, even things like politics, abortion, homosexuality, hell, or just how do I have strong faith? That's what you're going to get when you listen to Grace Bond Ministries. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you are blessed and encouraged by what we do here. Hey everybody, welcome back to Grace Bond Ministries. We are going to be taking a pause on our Israel series, and we're going to just talk about Charlie Kirk, his life, his passing, that kind of thing, and how that applies to us. And I just wanted to open up with this in our intro. One of the quotes that's been circling the internet lately from Charlie Kirk is somebody asked him, if you were to be remembered for anything, what would it be? And he said, I want to be remembered for courage for my faith. The most important thing is my faith in my life. And that immediately reminded me of Romans 1:16-17. It says, for I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew and also to the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. So we're going to continue this conversation on the other side. We'll see you in a minute. For it is by grace you are saved through faith, not of yourselves, but it is a gift of God. Ephesians 2:8. Welcome to Grace Bond Ministries. Well, hey everybody, welcome back. Listen, we are, me and Christian were talking about this the other day about, whether to go ahead and finish up that Israel series, because we still have to talk about the future state of Israel. But then we figured that maybe it would be beneficial to stop and just kind of talk about Charlie Kirk and his life and legacy and different things like that. And so yeah, we're gonna begin. Well, first, let me just ask, Christian, how's it going, man?
Good. We just finished up Sue at the pole stuff yesterday, and um, we had a good rally with about 60 youth, and I got to preach it on Habakkuk 3 too. So not a passage you get to preach a lot, or probably a book you may have never preached. So it was pretty cool to dig into that and just see. Almost, he was asking the problem of evil, so it was cool to kind of tackle that and walk through that with the youth. And Dad's coming home in just a week, so less than a week. So we're super excited from that. So how's it going with you, Jonathan?
Going pretty good. There is definitely, by the next time we release a podcast, I will have another child, and maybe even before this
Woo!
podcast release. So,
That's right.
so just know if it's late, that might be why. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's exciting. We're having a boy, and so I'll have a girl, I'll have a boy. Call that the $1 million home. You get one boy, one girl. But his name will be Onyx, and so we're just praying for a safe birth, and it's something that could happen any moment now. So it's close.
Yes, right.
So, but yeah, I'm excited about that, and excited to see what life's like when you have two of them running around. So,
Yeah, that'll be it's one for each of you to hold.
yeah, for real. I've already been given toddler duty, so I'm not giving the cute baby duty. I'm giving the toddler duty.
Yeah, that's right.
The toddler source.
Chasing the toddler. That's probably how my dad described me at that young too.
Well, all right. Well, listen, we want to we're going to try to transition here a little bit. Christian and I were talking as we go through this. We just want to talk about three main things. We want to talk about Charlie's life before he passed. A couple of things about when he passed, and kind of how we view the response should be, from here on. Uh, and there's been so much has happened. I mean, the entire world has been shaken by the passing of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and so uh, it has just been huge, and I mean, just almost unbelievable what has happened. And so we'll get into some more of that here in a minute, but Christian, what are some of your, what did you know about Charlie Kirk before all this happened? I mean, how much did you interact with him and or his content, I guess?
Yeah, I think it was cool seeing him. I mean, we talked about politics, we talked about ethics coming into college, and then it wasn't until probably the last couple of years, probably post COVID, that I really started seeing clips of him, and I'm like, who is this guy that looks as young as I am? And speaking about all these college campuses, because usually we're seeing guys like Frank Turek and Cliff Connect guy, and all these different older guys that are tackling him, but this guy coming in, and I just see him arguing, not really arguing, but just discussing with all these college kids, and the hitbacks that he saw, but just how genuine he was, and how much he just was able to stand up for his beliefs, and he was able to argue all these things, and then to figure out that he never went to college, or was he went to college and then he dropped out, was just pretty amazing to me. It's always, especially I feel like right now, you see people go to college and then drop out, and then they seem to be smarter than the people who went to college. So, but it was cool to see a guy that was standing up not only for his faith, but in his beliefs, and um, just the way he did it. Like he never really shot back at the other side. He never, he was just there to reason. He was there to make logic. And even with all the insults, I saw him multiple times just handle it with grace, and just to go. I mean, it's not, he didn't go around picking fights, but he was able to stand up when he needed to. And as a person that's definitely not confrontational, I commend him for that, because that's the type of ones I just want to walk away and not say anything. So, but he's a cool guy. What about you, Jonathan? What's your interaction with him?
It's a lot different now, and I'm sure it's the case for most of his videos. Of course, they're being passed around even more now, which is kind of ironic. But we'll talk about that later. But they I seen some of his stuff. I knew who Charlie Kirk was. I knew he traveled around to campuses, and immediately when I saw that, I was like, it actually made me think of Grace Bond Ministries. Like we don't typically do Q&A. Like people ask us questions, and sometimes we'll talk about those questions, but just what his goal, and he said this many times, was to get conversations started. And uh, because I mean, he's quoted many times about one of the worst things that we're taught now is that the other side is awful, and you're not supposed to. They're not worth communicating with. They're not worth dialoguing with, and somehow we built this culture of just, instead of corroboration, we just have fighting and bickering and things like that. We can't even have decent, genuine conversations. And that was the reason I started Grace Bond Ministries, because when I first went to college, I don't know how much I ever talked about this, but and Christian didn't know me till my second year. But when I had first showed up, I was like, I thought I knew it. I mean, I thought I knew all this stuff, and then
Yeah.
eventually talking to the professors and my other fellow classmates and stuff, I realized, hey, I don't know as much as I thought I did. And then I realized that one of the reasons I got so defensive was because I was so kind of insecure in what I believed, because I really didn't know as much as I thought I did. And so, uh, and so one of the things, though, that I think we were taught really well was just how to have a conversation with somebody that you don't necessarily agree with. And the more I've been in church and pastored and talked to Christians, I could just see just how prevalent that is. And it's not just young people. I mean, even older folks don't even like having conversations about things they disagree with. It's, you just don't understand, so uh, but that was Charlie's goal. Is Charlie wanted to get conversations started, and he wanted to have discussions. That's one of the things. That's one of the words I use when I talk about talking with somebody I disagree with. Is I want to have a discussion. We don't have to fight. We can debate. The debate has a kind of a bad connotation to it too. But a discussion, a debate, a conversation, that's what Charlie did. And one of the things that was mentioned multiple times throughout his funeral was the fact that Charlie, and I think Dr. Kirk said this too, but Charlie would hand his enemies the mic. And like Dr. Kirk said, he's like, a fascist doesn't hand their enemy a mic, or not an enemy, the people that oppose them or disagree with them or whatever, I think you just don't do that unless you are trying to get a genuine conversation going. Because, you think about that though, because Charlie, when he posted these videos, I'm sure he got millions of views, and now it's probably even growing. But, when he posted these videos, sure, it was him talking, but these people were also getting the microphone, being able to share their thoughts and beliefs and things like that. And they're also getting millions of views, and he would let them share their thoughts. He would tell them, why he thought they were wrong, why they thought they were right, or whatever it may be. And, 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 and honestly, I think one of the things that was building up is, for one, like we just talked about, our country, our people are just not built for that. And so it was a cultural change. And I think his passing, we'll talk about that again in a minute, but I think his passing even added more to that cultural change. But it was a cultural change of, hey, we're not enemies, we're neighbors. We just need to talk about these things, try to figure these things out, and quit polarizing each other, different things like that. Now I do know that there has been a lot of, and listen, if you've never done a live Q&A, I know Christian and I both have, but if you've never done a live Q&A, I mean, you're on the spot. That's one of the things that's crazy as a minister too, is like sometimes we're just like put on the spot. Like somebody comes up to you and asks you a question, or somebody comes up to you out of the blue and tells you about this thing going on in their life, and you don't have time to go look it up. You don't have time to go look up scriptures or do this or do that. It's just on the spot. And and so sometimes, and I really do think Charlie did an excellent job from what I've seen. But when you're answering on the spot, it's on the spot. And he was. If you listen to his funeral and stuff, or actually Dr. Turk's podcast that he did on it, cross-examined, but he talked about how Charlie would all the time be asking, like Dr. Turek or his friend, I can't remember what his friend's name is, the really smart guy, but he was always asking his friend, different things. Is this true? What's the background of this? What's the history of this? He was always constantly learning, and so he can make sure he was sharing and telling the truth, and it was just fascinating to watch. And his style of doing it, having the Q&A and all that stuff, that I'm sure that definitely seemed to help, in what he was doing. And it's just pretty amazing. But there are some things that he said that I mean, who knows? I'd hate to say that I could agree with everything he said, because there's probably hours and hours of sayings from Charlie Kirk on there. But I could tell you this, that he has gotten me thinking about a couple of other things, and that a lot of the quotes that you see now is that are really misinterpreted or something like that, especially when it comes to the racism stuff, the DEI, all that kind of thing. But like one of them, I was just looking it up, and he said, when I see a plane, I really hope that if there is a black guy or black person flying that plane, I hope that they're qualified. And which was kind of a shot at this DEI movement where they're hiring people to meet some kind of diversity quota instead of people who are qualified. And listen, he wasn't saying that, a black person couldn't be qualified, to fly a plane, but anyway, so stuff like that has been taken out of context, and people are the ones that I've seen that are saying, it's a good thing that he died. they're saying stuff like that because he was a racist and homophobe or whatever it may be. And again, that's what's wrong with our country is we can't have conversations, and people would rather misinterpret and misunderstand somebody rather than actually deal with their own beliefs. And uh, so yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think I got into his podcast too, and I think for me especially, like I try to stay outside the political realm as much as I can, just because I know half of it's just arguments that don't mean anything at the time. But he kind of, like you said, he opened my eyes to a lot of topics, and he was able to explain stuff really well. He had a gift from God to be able to explain things. And like you said, he let his opponents explain their position. He never wanted to assume. He was always asking questions. Um, and I think it just goes back to that verse that says to be ready in season and out of season. Like he was ready to explain stuff on the spot. And sure, not everything he explained was gospel, was about his faith. But I had heard that almost every time he did a Q&A like that, he started off explaining his faith and sharing the gospel with them before they ever got into the Q&A. So he was always ready to share his faith. He was always ready to share his beliefs. And so we may not agree with everything that he said, but we've got to be ready to share our beliefs on the spot too. And so I think that's very commendable. That's very well, something that we can learn, something that we can take and discuss with everybody else.
Yeah, and even the day he was shot, he had shared the gospel right before he started the Q&A.
Yeah.
That day. And so, I mean, literally, one of the last things this guy ever said was the gospel. What a remarkable thing to be remembered by. But and so the next part of this is that he died, and that he was killed. I mean, he didn't. I mean, it depends how you define what is wrong, but he truly was an innocent guy. I mean, all he did was have conversations and things like that. And Christian and I have talked about this a little bit about him being a martyr. Christian, what was the definition?
Let me pull up so I don't misquote. Oxford Dictionary says a person who is killed or made to suffer because of their religious or other beliefs.
Yeah, a lot of times in Christian circles, we talk about martyrs of the faith a lot. There's modern day martyrs, that died because of their faith. There's and then of course pretty much every disciple, died because of their
Yeah.
faith. And uh, and this is where I forgot who I heard say this. Maybe it was Dr. Turk or somebody else, but Charlie was most well known for his political conversations. I think after his death, when all these quotes and stuff really started coming out about, his main thing was the gospel. I think that was kind of eye opening. But if he had to pick, but he was definitely known for his political views and things like that. And so, uh, and that hatred was building because of that. Again, because that's just how our country's built. I mean, right now in the culture, and one of the arguments he made, it was a lot of it had to do with colleges, brainwashing students into liberal ideology or forcing them, into liberal ideology and saying either you do this or I'm going to give you a bad grade. Like that stuff legitimately happens. People say it doesn't, but it does. And
If you've ever been to college, you know that happens.
yeah, I
Or
mean,
vice versa. I'm sure
yeah.
there's some Christian colleges that might do the same thing. So
So it's uh, and so he would go around, he'd have these conversations, and people would get upset, and you could see the comments online, different things like that. Again, he never stopped a conversation. He always kept them going. Even some weird people, like they had that one guy was Satanist or whatever, wearing that weird mask. I mean, he's like, come say what you guys
yeah,
say.
I
And
thought you were about to talk about the old man that tried to fight him.
no,
Have you seen
no,
that clip? That was crazy. It's like 50, 60 something year old man. He's like, suit
Yeah,
up or shut up, Charlie Kirk.
yeah, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
I was like, what the heck,
But this is the other thing I was thinking because, and Christian share his thoughts on it here in just a second. But I think Charlie was both a martyr for political ideology and for the gospel, because again, he said multiple times, if anybody remembers me for anything, I want it to be for the gospel of Jesus Christ. And you got to think, with somebody with that kind of leverage, that kind of popularity, I mean, and I'm sure there's people that didn't like him just because of his religious beliefs. It was pretty funny. People would come up to his come up to the microphone, and like I remember somebody asking him about abortion, and the person got stumped because he's like, because they asked him, do you believe abortion is wrong just because the Bible says so? He says no. He said, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said that's a big part of it, but that's not the only reason I believe this. I believe it because it's logical, and it could be both in the
Yeah.
Bible and logical at the same time. And so I think I'm just trying to think of this from a spiritual perspective, and this would be more of a conversation for Christians, because listen, I mean, if you're not a Christian, especially if you don't even believe in a spiritual realm, this is not going to mean anything to you. But I do think that if think about it, if I was in Satan's shoes, I would want to silence this voice, and
Hmm.
it's the same thing. Even this might be kind of a bad idea, but to compare him to Jesus, but even when Jesus was crucified, Jesus's ministry exploded after that because of the crucifixion, and I definitely think Satan had a hand in that, thinking, oh, I'm going to defeat him and all this stuff. I'm going to strike his heel, you know, and, uh, and that's not what happened. And I think the same thing happened with Charlie, is that, again, his big thing was the gospel. And I think, while people may have said, oh, he's upset about him because of his political views, and listen, political views are all rooted in some kind of spiritual understanding anyways. But, I think with all that tied together, I definitely think there was a spiritual part of this, that I think he was could be considered a martyr, both for the Christian faith and for right wing ideology in politics, and I think that's obvious now because of the up. I mean, what they say, they had 32,000 new applications for TP USA
Yeah.
things. So uh, and
I think
people, I mean, it's just crazy. So, uh, but anyways, I'll stop there, Christian. If you got anything you want to throw in there.
no, that was great. And I'm agreeing with you. I think the thing that was a testament to me is, like you said, we knew him mainly for his political beliefs, but I think that has a lot to do with just what media wanted to put online, what people were going to quote, what was going to catch the eye. Like, media's not going to want to post the gospel, that he shares the gospel for everything. But I think even through his funeral, even or his memorial service, even through everything, like his faith was the thing that held out on top. Nobody was really talking about his political beliefs besides the people that wanted to bash who he was. It was his faith that kind of took the front ground. And it's really cool to see, really a testament of what we are to do. Like he said, he wanted his faith and his courage to be the front lines, and he was the guy that wanted to go into politics and change it from the inside for the faith. Like God calls us all to different roles, different jobs. And so I can definitely see him as a martyr for both beliefs. And I think it was a little hesitant to me because you have a lot of people that are what you call Christian nationalists. And so we can kind of take our American and patriotism and stuff like that and put it over our faith at times. And so I think when I first heard martyr, that was where I went, and it was kind of a little sketchy because you can get way too far towards the right wing ideology and make it more important than your faith. But I think he was trying to swing that pendulum, as you say, back to what faith is, and he was making faith and reason come together, kind of like all the early church fathers, if you've ever studied them, like Augustine, guys like that, trying to bring everything back together. And it was brutal, and because I'm sure most of you, or a lot of you, had seen the video because it got posted, and if you went on X, it was a post without warning almost. So, but it was good to see that he more than likely didn't suffer according to the doctors. So the Lord protected him in that, and I know that's comforting for Erica, and just the testament of her going to the funeral and saying that she forgives the shooter, because I think that's a lot of the element that people lost out, that the shooter needs Jesus too. He was made in the image of God just like anything else, and it doesn't take away the evil that he did, but it does mean that God, Christ came and died for him too. Forgiveness is for all, no matter what we've done. So for her to come to his memorial service just 11 days later and say that she forgives him is pretty monumental, despite the fact of everything that has happened. So I think a testament of her sharing about him and her faith can attest to his faith and how he led his home, his two little girls.
And I wanted to back up and say this too. Listen, so Dr. Frank Turek is a Christian apologist. If you've never heard of him, travels around to college campuses and he presents on his book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, which if you've never read that, I would highly recommend it. It's very, very good, very, very thorough, but very simple, simple enough to get the whole gist of all the apologetics that lead to believing that Jesus is the only way. And, but anyways, I didn't realize that Charlie Kirk had actually reached out to Dr. Turek and asked him to mentor him, kind of, and that they spent all this time together. And so Dr. Turek has a podcast called Cross Examined, and I've actually been able to meet Dr. Turek before. Me and Christian both, but anyway, he actually, and I know it had to have been hard because Dr. Turek, once his people mentioned he was there. Once the conspiracy, there's a conspiracy that the guy in the white hat was giving signals or whatever. Well, that was Dr. Turek. He wasn't giving signals, and so that was when I had first heard about it, and that he was like, that was me. And then he made a podcast and he checked with Erica, which was really, really thoughtful of him, and she actually wanted him to share some of the details that he saw, because he was standing right behind Charlie when the shot happened, and then he ran with Charlie to the car and the security guys to the car as well, and he shared all those details. And he said he only shared what Erica thought would be okay, and so I figured we were going to get half of that, but I have just been pondering that ever since. Is why would she want him to share that information? And again, I think it's just a reminder, for one, is to humanize this guy. When you have to murder somebody, you have to dehumanize them. And so that's basically what would have happened. I think that's one of the things that's happening now. It's he's getting humanized. He's a human, man. And I think even Tyler, it seems like he's feeling some heavy guilt, from what he did. And so anyways, Dr. Turk talks about that. His podcast is called Cross Examine. And it's always interesting because you always hear like apologetics words in the middle of anything he talks about. And, and he talks about eyewitness accounts and stuff like that about the Gospels. And he is actually able to give an eyewitness account. But my favorite quote from him was, he said when they were in the car, and he said the security team, everybody was doing everything they possibly could to try to save his life. But they say that he definitely would have been unconscious immediately, and that, he probably would have, he died before he made it to the hospital. But he said, when he was in the car with him, he said, I was just looking at his eyes and he was gone. He's like, he was looking, this was his quote. He said he was looking right past me into eternity. And he also mentioned that during the funeral too. If you remember that during the funeral, Dr. Turk spoke there too. But I just thought it was a powerful quote. I couldn't imagine how difficult it must have been to, I guess it was within a week. Dr. Turk had to make that episode. It was just a tough thing, uh, and but one of the things though, and I'm like, how cool is it that Dr. Frank Turek speaks at your funeral, and the president of the United States is there, who it really seems like that Donald Trump is not a Christian, based off what he says and his lack of profession of faith, that kind of stuff. But it doesn't seem like he's a Christian. It seems like he's friendly towards the Christians, and he's friendly towards Christianity. And of course, he knows that most of his supporters probably are Christians. But uh, but I was just thinking about that. Here you got Dr. Turek talking about evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ at this guy's funeral. And I've been to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of funerals. I mean, I don't even know where I'm at now, probably 200 or 300, because I used to work at a funeral home, and I've been a minister for a long time. But I have never heard that before. I never heard somebody give an apologetic for the resurrection of Jesus at a funeral. And I surely have never, I don't know of any time. I mean, maybe somebody that's a little bit more of a history buff than me, but I've never seen something like this, where at a funeral you get some of the most powerful people in the United States coming on the platform talking about Jesus Christ and his salvation, and how that was the main thing in Charlie's life. And I'm just sitting there thinking, watching that funeral, I'm like, there is millions and millions and millions of people going to watch this. And almost every single speaker, even Donald Trump, you could tell he doesn't really know the terms to use and stuff when he's talking, but even Donald Trump was talking about, he's in heaven and with his Savior, his Lord and Savior. I thought it was pretty interesting. That's a different story, but he's like, he's in heaven now. And like, Jesus was talked about by almost every single person. And of course, the most impactful, I think, for everybody was probably when Erica Kirk spoke. And like that quote Christian just said, she says she forgives this guy. And I just couldn't imagine, and I know she had to have thought long and hard about that. But, and you could tell she wrote that speech and stuff like that. But just to say those words, whether she had it written down or prepared or not, had to have been one of the most difficult things ever. And honestly, the way she talks, and the things that we hear about where Charlie's heart is it seems like it's true that even Charlie would forgive him. And Shane Pruitt, I think it was Shane Pruitt, posted a Facebook post, and he said, one of the craziest things about the grace of God is that if Tyler Robinson repented of his sins and came to faith in Christ, that him and Charlie would be in heaven together forever. And like, I mean, what a crazy thought about just the power of the gospel. And so, man, I could literally just go on and on and on, but Christian, I'm sure you probably want to jump in there. See, what I usually do is I usually say what Christian's thinking, and then by the time he gets a chance to talk, it's already been said. So.
I think the Shane Pruitt thing was pretty cool. I don't think I saw that, but I've always talked about it, even looking at Paul and all the guys that he had murdered for their faith, pre-salvation, and then for him to walk into heaven and to see them as now brothers in Christ is pretty outstanding. It's pretty crazy. And yeah, watching Charlie Kirk's funeral, I'm just like, how the gospel was presented almost every speaker, and just thinking about all these people that he knew and all the Christian artists that came before him, like Phil Wickham and Brandon Lake and Cody Carnes and all these guys. It's like, I can't imagine. It's like, usually we just pick out songs to play through the sound system, and he's got full live bands there, hour-long worship service. Like, people were led to the feet of Jesus at his memorial service. And so you may differ in political beliefs, but I think at the end of the day, like, you got to admit that he came, and through his testament, through his life, like, he led people to Jesus and to the feet of Jesus, not just his politics. at the end of the day. So us as Christians, no matter what your political beliefs are, your faith should outstand all those things. And I mean, we've done a podcast on politics and Christianity and if they're opposed or not. So you can go listen to that one to get our kind of full take on all of that. But I think that's where the line has to be drawn. Like he's in the presence of the Lord now. And Psalms 116 tells us precious in the eyes of the Lord are the death of his saints. And so it may hurt for those on earth. It may just still be almost shocking. But he's in the eyes of the Lord. He's in the arms of the Lord, and he's having his eternal reward for following Christ so faithfully. And so I think what's left for us is to just take up the same badge of courage that Charlie had and to follow after the Lord, whatever he calls us to. And I think through one, I can't remember if that was her memorial or through one of the podcasts, talking about his favorite verse being what Isaiah 6 said when the Lord calls out and says, who's going to go? And he says, send me. Here I am, send me. So that's a testament to who Charlie was and how he approached his faith. So it's pretty cool to see that.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking too. Is what happens now? And obviously we've seen a huge things taking place, and it's affected the entire world. And like somebody had said that Charlie had just gotten back from Korea or something like that, helping out some Christians over there, and I mean, it's just all people all across the world are impacted by his life. But again, I think especially now that he's got the full image, of Christ, and he's in his presence, for eternity. I mean, he definitely would say, this is the most important thing. And again, this is kind of the next part is, where do we go from here? And I think Christian nailed it on the head. But one of the verses I talk about too is this promise of the new creation for those who are in Christ, those who are saved. It says in Revelation 21, then I heard a loud voice from the throne, look, God's dwelling is with humanity, and he will live with them. They will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them and will be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Grief, crying, and pain will be no more, because the previous things have passed away. And that is such a powerful scripture of something that is yet to come. Because, one of the things, and Dr. Turek, he actually just presented again at some college the other day. And in his presentation, he always, a lot of times he'll talk about the problem of evil. And, and a lot of people will say, well, God must not care about evil if he's allowing this stuff to happen. And then you read this verse, it's like, well, obviously he cares about evil because he is going to do something about it. And perhaps the best illustration I heard from a preacher one time is he brought a button up on the stage, and he said, he had brought one of the worship team people up there, and he said, I want to ask you a question. If you could hit this button and get rid of all the evil on the world, would you do it? And he was like, yes, of course. And so he's like, okay. And then he goes to hit the button. He said, wait now. He said, but if you hit that button, it starts with you. He said, because evil starts from within us. I mean, it's we're born under the sin of Adam and different things. And so, it's what his point was, is that, evil is rooted in the individuals. And long before it becomes this huge evil act or whatever happens, and so you think about that, like people will say, I just wish Jesus would come back. And I was thinking the other day, I was like, well, I was born in 1998, and I was like, if Jesus would have came back in 1997, I wouldn't be in heaven. And so I'm glad that that he decided to wait, and so that I could have a relationship with him as well. And I'm glad that he's the one that's going to make that final trumpet call, and it doesn't have to be me. It has to, like he did with Noah, he has to shut the door of the ark, I don't know if you've ever seen that in that passage, but God is the one that shut the door of the ark. And So I'm just glad that it's him that has to make that decision. Uh, but again, I think what I've been seeing is, pastors and leaders and even political people, everything. For one, it shows that there is an evil behind the liberal side of things, and I feel like I can confidently say that, and that there is an evil influence on that side of things, and I think the devil is at work on the left. And I think you even see that with Tyler. I mean, his dad was talking. Now, granted, his dad's Republican, but they were also Mormon, so that's a whole different story. But he wasn't always like that. And he went to school, he went to college, and then he was, and people are saying this wasn't politically motivated. Yes, it was. I mean, come on, piece it together. And he was dating somebody. He was in a homosexual relationship with somebody that was transitioning genders, and just kind of being taken away, and so then that hatred was building, and all it takes, man. I mean, like it took some planning, different things like that, but at the end of the day, it is about a half-second decision to pull a trigger on a gun, and so he made that decision, and they've said he's been on watch because and all this stuff. So anyways, I think for one, as Christians, we are reminded of the forgiveness of Jesus Christ. Especially I think Erica did a really good job of reminding us of that, and I think too that it's a reminder as Christians that even in America, as Christians, we are not safe, and that it is always a possibility that we will be persecuted for our faith. And I had a preacher tell me one time. He said, until you've actually considered doing worldwide mission somewhere, he said, you've never really truly considered your calling. And and Christian and I both, if we've met missionaries and people from across the world, and you hear these stories of some of these places where it's just danger every single day. And people, I mean, you have a chance of dying every single day, or you just read the New Testament. I mean, every single one of the disciples besides John, and John was boiled alive and survived, but all of them were persecuted for their faith. And so it really gets me thinking, as a Christian, is there anything that could stop me from sharing the gospel, sharing the love of Jesus Christ with other people? And and I was talking to somebody, and they were like, it's really not a shock that something like this happened just because of the hatred that's building, but it's definitely an eye opener, just thinking. And of course, in our country, we've had all kinds of shootings and gun violence and things like that, and Charlie talked about that as well. But I think for me, it's just motivating to remember to stand firm in the faith. Remember to be a Second Amendment Christian. keep that gun on me just in case, and that's a whole different story. But and just to stand for the gospel, stand for what's important, and show no fear in what we do and what we stand for. But also, I think we also need to be like Charlie. We need to be able to do it in a way where people know that we love them, that we care about them. Like we're not just here to win an argument, we're here because we really care about people. And especially in debates, a lot of times, the debates that happen or conversations that happen are not even for the two people talking. It's for the people that are listening. And so that's important to keep in mind as well. So I don't know. That's just kind of a brainstorm of a lot of my kind of thoughts about where to go from here. But Christian, do you have anything?
Yeah, I think we need to stand firm in our faith, be unashamed, like you talk, like he enacted for us, like Romans 1:16 says. And I think that is a willing testament of who he was and who we need to be. We need to be ready in season, now the season. I had another thought and now it slipped my mind. But I think, just going back to the shooter and just this building up of evil, like the Bible tells us there's going to come a day when they call good evil and evil good. And I think we're we're in that time period. The left, the world in general, is praising things that are evil, praising abortion, praising drunkenness, praising sex outside of marriage, praising with the homosexuality and everything else. It's praising what God never intended. It's praising sin. And so I think we need to be bold and we need to be courageous and be able to point that out. And that's kind of what Habakkuk was talking about. We just had See You at the Pole. The theme verse was from Habakkuk 3:2, talking about standing in awe of God and reviving his works and remembering in his wrath, remember mercy. Because these people were being, God was about to send judgment on the Israel. And in chapter 2, he tells them the righteous shall live by faith. And I think that's where we have to be now. No matter the situation, no matter what the world says, we are to live by faith. We are to stand in confidence in who God is. Was that a See You at the Pole shirt?
Yeah, they gave me one yesterday, and I was
Nice.
like, yeah, it
I
sure does
saw
put
the,
back 3-2 on there.
I was like, I saw the word awe on there
Yeah.
because I had students going, what does awe mean? And I was like, well, it's not the awe man, like we often say. But yeah, the righteous shall live by faith. Habakkuk 2:4, I believe.
Yeah,
That's what we got to do.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's just amazing. I think I'm kind of getting repetitive now. That's usually a sign to me that I probably need to stop talking when I go full circle. But you know, you know, I don't know how this will come across, but one of the things for me, it was like I feel like I was kind of doing a little bit of what Charlie does. I mean, I'm like when I saw this happen, like I don't know that it really changed me a whole lot, because as far as like being bold and stuff like that, because like, listen, Christian and I, we try to be bold, and Christian brings me down a little bit and calms me down, and I bring him up to be a little bit more confrontational, and
That's right.
hopefully we meet somewhere in the middle. But just standing for the truth. I mean, 1 Corinthians 13, everybody always quotes that love passage, but it says, true love does not rejoice in unrighteousness, it rejoices in the truth. And that's what true love is. And to be able to share the truth in love, and for people to know that you love them, even if they disagree with you, even if they hate you because they disagree with you, I think that's a win in my book. And I think that's what we're called to as Christians. But and I think Christians right too, that the Christian nationalism is a concern, because so many people can be so wrapped up in politics, so wrapped up in this is our country, blah 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 blah, and forget that these people are people, and say something stupid like Donald Trump and say, I hate my opponent, you just got to be careful, because and I'm sure a lot of people probably appreciated what he said, but listen, if we all got what we deserve, we'd all be dead and in hell. Okay. And I'm thankful that God has forgiven me, and I'm thankful that he has opened that forgiveness to anybody who will accept his forgiveness. And that can be even some of the worst people that we've ever met, some of the worst people that have ever lived on this earth. And the Apostle Paul was arguably one of those people, and he killed Christians. He killed people regularly, or at least had them killed. And he became the strongest Christian that the world has ever known, ever. And, and so you just never know. And again, I think one of my things, and I know we got to wrap this up, but I think one of my things is, is as Christians, listen, we can back up and look at this from the big picture. Like, this life is not all there is. Like, this is actually one of the shortest parts of all of eternity, is the life we have here on earth. Yet that is where so many people focus on. And so many people focus on life here and now instead of the life to come. And that's detrimental to the individual and detrimental to the people around us too, when that's what we're worried about. But I do think, just like with apologetics, when you defend the faith, like you can't defend the faith and get somebody into heaven. They still have to put their faith in Jesus at a certain point. But I think with apologetics, and I think even with politics, that if you can take down some of those walls and get people to take down the walls they built up to reject Christ, that will open up their hearts just a little bit more to hear what Christ has for them. And so I don't know. I've already said multiple things that are probably going to get me in trouble. So this could possibly be my last podcast. Who knows? We'll see.
If we're canceled, we love you guys.
Yeah, yeah,
Or if
yeah,
Facebook takes us down, we're still on YouTube.
yeah. Right. Yeah. If that don't work, we'll go on Truth Social too. So
That's right. We can post anything on X, so we'll just
that's
post on
right.
X.
I don't know, Christian. You got any final thoughts?
I think we might have said everything we can say, and so I think it's stand firm in your faith, be unashamed of the gospel, and let's see how the Lord continues to work. Because even in the midst of this evil, the phrase is always light shines brightest in the deepest darkness. And we're in the darkness of the world and we can shine bright for Him as long as we don't put our light under a basket and hide it. So let's shine bright for the Lord.
Yeah. Amen. All right. Well, hopefully we haven't offended you too much, and we will see you on the next podcast talking about, Lord willing, talking about the future state of Israel as we finish up that series, and then we'll have a couple more for this year. So stay tuned for that, and we will see you guys on the next podcast. God bless.
Thank you so much for watching the Grace Bond Ministries podcast or listening to the podcast. I know there's various ways that you could be listening to this right now or watching this right now, but I just want to say thank you so much. And if you would, wherever you're listening, if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel. On podcast, please leave a 5-star review and write a little thing in there. If you're on Facebook, leave a comment. Let me know how this impacted you, or even any other questions or comments or concerns you may have. And also, if you have an idea or you have something you'd really want to talk more deeply about, you can always email me at gracebondministries@gmail.com. But thank you so much. Remember, for it is by grace you are saved through faith, and not of yourselves, for it is the gift of God. Thank you for listening to Grace Bond Ministries.